right, welcome back to our live Q&A session with our panelists, Kavita Jaisi, Andrew Patterson, and Jen Olmstead. So we wanted to make sure that we were live for a Q&A for the people that are joining us. And we've got some questions for you. We're going to jump right in. If you have a question at home, please feel free to jump on the Q&A panel and type it in, and we'll keep track of those that we answer. So first up, and I'll leave it for you to decide who should answer this. With schools going to distance and online learning, how are students at SIS being assessed? So we talked about how we're assessing the parents' reaction to all this, but how are students being assessed? Andrew, Kavita, who would like to answer that?
I'll start if you like, and then I'm sure Kavita can add to it. So of course, students are continuing to be assessed right throughout, just as we would normally do in a classroom. So every activity that a student does, everything they submit, every discussion they have in the online classroom, these are all ways that teachers evaluate and see how well students are learning, how effective the new teaching methods are, and how the teacher needs to adapt. Because quite often when you try something new, it doesn't work the first time, and that's normal in any kind of teaching or any kind of education. And so assessment gives us a way to check and see, have the students got it yet or not, or do we need to continue to teach in a different kind of way? So this will happen continuously in all kinds of different means. But then of course, still, at the end of the semester or the end of the year, we'll still have our end of year assessments also. They'll be done in different ways in some cases than normal, but we will still assess and make sure that we really know as a school, have the students learnt to our expectations, where are the gaps, and to make sure that students continue to move forward at the right pace, so that when we pick up teaching again live in the classroom, they'll be ready to seamlessly move into that and move forward from there.
Okay. Kavita, would you like to add? Please.
Yes. One of the first things we did as a group, SIS group of schools, is that we relooked at our assessment policy. So we had to adjust the kind of assessments that we give in the classroom so that it's not solely focused only on exams as a major component of the assessments, but the ongoing little assessments needs to be adjusted. Assessment styles needs to be adjusted too, because it's not easy to give an exam when you can't see the students, although there is an app available for us to do that. But online assessments students could also be marked based on a discussion question, a discussion forum, their involvement in providing ideas in certain brainstorming activities. And the style differs, and that also contributes to the students' overall grades later. So one of the main things we did at first was adjusting the assessment policy.
Okay, thank you. And another question we have from the audience here, what if SIS is calling their distance learning program the new way of learning? Is there anything unique about the way SIS is tackling this? What's different about SIS's Singapore Agricultural Schools distance learning?
Well, I'm not sure that I can say that it's unique, because I don't really know what every school around the world is doing. I imagine there are many different kinds of approaches, but we have tried to make sure we've got a balanced approach. So it may not suit every parent, but it will suit most parents, and it will get the job done. So this combination, I think, of the platform by which parents can interact and students can interact with the teacher asynchronously by giving assignments and students getting feedback from the teacher in that way, plus those videos, those pre-recorded videos that students can watch in their own time, and then plus the live Zoom calls for teachers to check understanding and to make sure students get it. I think that combination of those three elements is the core of our program. I'm sure many schools are doing that kind of thing as well, but I think that's a good, balanced, effective program to ensure learning continues at a solid pace and suits most students.
Okay, thank you.
I think, may I add? Yes, I think the edge that the CIS group has is that it's a group of schools. So we meet regularly every week to discuss what we're doing, how we can do better. So it's not just one school managing an online program. It's actually 7 schools managing an online program, and that's really powerful.
I see. I see. So you've got the network effect in your favor in terms of learning.
Yes.
That's always valuable. We've got a parent here that says she has preschool children. Does it make sense for me to continue to keep sending them to school that's using distance learning? Isn't it better for me to send them when school starts again? I'm assuming regular traditional school starts again. Andrew?
Yeah, I think, sure. I mean, I think it is very challenging in preschool, certainly to duplicate what we normally do in school at home, but we can still do a lot. And I think it's very important that if possible, parents stay engaged and keep their children engaged at school with the teacher. Because if they lose a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months of connection with the teacher and with the class, it's going to be much harder to reestablish that again once they come back. You know, you get into different kind of habits when you're at home and not having a focused program. And I think that it would not be in the student's best interest in most cases to suddenly pull out for a few months and then try and come back later. Because when they come back later, their peers and their cohort will have had 2 or 3 months of education, back and forward communication with the teacher, engagement in the class, exposed to more vocabulary, exposed to more discussions. But those that have missed out won't have that. And so I think that's going to create a difficulty when they resume class as normal. So I know it's hard for preschool parents because they have to be there with their child in many cases, and it's unavoidable at that age. But if they can persevere through, I think the end result is very beneficial for their child, that they push through with their child and see this to the end. And then their child will be more comfortable then to resume normal classes once we're back in the classroom.
Okay.
I'd like to add something. Yeah, as Andrew said, you know, a preschooler goes to school because we want them to develop socialization. You know, they socialize, they develop the social skills, and sometimes it's hard to replicate that at home. But you know, going fully online, there's also another skills that we look at would be motor development. So that is something we could possibly replicate at home by doing full online, but you need to have the right person who knows the right techniques to do it. Yeah, so as the teacher probably guides you online, you know, you need to follow it up with some activities at home so that those motor skills are equally developed. So without that pseudo teacher kind of support, it's a little bit harder to do it fully online.
Yeah,
so it sounds like, sorry,
yeah, go ahead. If I could add to that also, I think that's right. And also because teachers are in the best place to know how the whole class is going. From the parent's point of view, you only see your child, but our teacher can see a range of children and know about how children are at that age and from historical reasons as well, historical background as well. And so the teacher can assess, are these students progressing at the right pace for that particular age level? So even though the student may not be in the physical class, that assessment is still taking place, that evaluation of their progress, that engagement with the teacher, that style of learning. And I think that's what we don't want to interrupt if we can avoid it. You know, research shows that preschool is very, very important for future learning. It's one of the most well-founded research that's out there, right? That proves that preschool is very important for the development of children's education. You can see it even in outcomes at primary 6, at secondary 4, at JC2 level, the impact of preschool. And so we don't really want to avoid cutting that out of the children's education. We know it's more difficult for parents, but I think it's certainly worth engaging in the long run. And the other thing I think to mention is that sometimes, even though you can't see the learning taking place, there is still different kinds of learning going on. The student is getting used to different kinds of activities that they're now doing at home with mum or dad or with a caregiver. They're using a device a little bit more in a positive way. There are different kinds of social and intellectual skills being developed quite quietly behind the scenes. So I think that is very powerful and a good reason to keep your children engaged in preschool.
Well, I'd just like to add, as a non-academic, but a parent, I've found myself, on working holidays around the world where I've had my child, and I want to make sure that they're being productive, that they're learning something while they're spending their time throughout the day. And it's difficult to maintain that structure. I mean, I must say I try, but I often fail to be disciplined enough to add structure. And for want of an education system behind my efforts, it would be so nice to have not only an academic, but an academic keeping that structure aligned with traditional learning goals and outcomes. So
yep.
I can see the value there. We've got another question here. I guess this is more tactical. What advice can you give to parents who now need to help our children with online learning? What are some practical tips that we can give parents that are on the call?
I could start that. Start off by providing the structure. I think routines are important. As parents, we'd like them to also engage with the schools to know what the school's plan is. So really know the timetable, when students need to be connected, go online, and when they need to study, because school circulars, school communication, the head teachers would have given them the advice from the start. Provide a nice environment, a conducive environment for the child to learn. That's also important. And as Andrew have said earlier, that if the parents are not able to monitor what the students are doing, provide them an environment where some level of monitoring can be done offline. Also help them or work with them on, where structure and routine is concerned. Give them breaks in between, because, going online, glued on a computer for too long a time is also not that good. It's not that healthy. So, so those are the three. Anything from you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that, I would encourage parents not to get stressed out. It's okay not to do it perfectly. None of us are doing it perfectly right now. You know what I mean? And so I think if parents just do the best they can, arrange their household as they can, they don't need to take over school. They don't need to become the teacher. The teacher will still do that. So we just need the parent support for the younger grade levels, just to help with the communication a little bit, with the tools a little bit, and to try and support the school, in what we're trying to do. But we don't expect parents to take over for us and become their child's full-time tutor. That's not realistic, and we don't expect that. And so I think parents sometimes feel guilty that they can't help their children with the work. That's the teacher's job. It's the teacher's job to see whether or not the student understands or not, and to help the student to improve. We just need the parent to facilitate the communication only.
So to drill down there, then what can we define? What is the parent's role at school? I know that we always expect and hope that parents are involved in education. I know I'm heavily involved in my son's education. How has that role changed? What's their role now during this potentially temporary period in time?
I don't think the role has changed. They are the provider. They are there to support the child's learning. We hope that they are also involved in the other development of other skills on their children. So we want them to be available, working with the children and working with the school to make this successful. And I think that hasn't changed, whether whether we deliver education in school or we deliver education online. But the tasks involved has changed.
I see. So it's fair to say that, a parent who's got a child in preschool or pre-K is used to having their child dropped off and they're out of their life while they go to work or they make the home. Mm-hmm. And now for that age group specifically, we're saying, well, we need you to be helping apply some of that structure and helping facilitate the guidance from the teacher as well as, maintaining your role and building character and all the things parents are supposed to do at home anyway.
Yeah.
And if they're tending that garden properly, then we'll come out of this with everybody on track in terms of moving forward. Okay. So we've got some questions, additional questions. Do you think that with schools going online and higher involvement of parents, schools should give a discount on fees? Throw that hot potato out there.
I think that's a very difficult question to answer on behalf of all schools, and many schools have different ways of handling that. So I'm not sure this is the right forum, Ryan, to answer that question.
Okay, fair enough. How do you know your school's distance learning program is working? And I know we've covered checking in with parents and surveys, but how do what's the high level thought process in terms of, yes, I think we're doing a good job? How do you get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly from the teacher's point of view, what I mentioned before about assessment is very critical. And so we are, of course, grading students along the way, but we are also measuring the students' engagement. So we are checking every week to find out, are students logging in at the right time? Are they submitting their work? Are they doing the quality of work that we expect? And then we are troubleshooting with the parents directly if that's not happening. This is a wide range of students and a wide range of family situations. And so we are trying to work with parents to make sure that students remain engaged at the right level during distance learning. Because actually distance learning affects some students different to other students. So actually some students are doing better. Maybe the introverts, for example, are thriving being at home and without the pressure of the social environment, maybe the insecurity they might feel at certain times. They're doing really well, working harder than ever. But other students who are more social, more engaged, require that more physical interaction are struggling more. And so in either case, we need to adapt to those student situations, support them and encourage them, and make sure they can work through distance learning in the best way possible. So teachers are continually monitoring that and working case by case with students. And from the school end also, we're also monitoring that and checking those engagement scores, checking those results, still doing standardized assessments, just to make sure that we are on track as a school in delivering the outcomes we promise parents.
So in that case, in that sense, maybe in terms of who's getting the most out of this in terms of comfort, those children going through puberty might be experiencing either highs or lows right now that the others are not.
Could be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Ryan, I think you also brought up the point about, it's important that, there's another element to really know if the school distance learning program is working is by looking at or assessing also where our students, teachers, and parents are with regards to their mental health. So I think that's also a bigger element, an umbrella element, and that's a work in progress because we're trying to figure out how we can support them in that sense as well.
Okay, fair enough. I'd imagine that there'll be a lot of books written about mental health after we get through the COVID era.
I'm sure.
Okay. So here's a question from a parent. I'm thinking of switching schools, but with the COVID-19 pandemic on, I am unsure. Any advice on how to select the right school for my child?
Okay, well, I can start on that one if you like. I think the foundational qualities are still the same. So when you assess a school, you've got to look at what's behind that school. Does it all rely on a single person to make sure that things happen in that school? Or does that school have good backup, good expertise behind running the school to ensure the school is meeting the international or the local standards that they say they try and meet? So I think the backup of where the school gets their resources from, and I guess established quality. You can see, from the history of a school, have they consistently produced good results, good outcomes? Do they have students going to good universities? Is there proof? Is there proof that they can deliver the outcomes for students? For me as a parent, I'd be looking for that.
Adding on to that, now that we're talking about online learning, and given the fact that when school opens in July, August, we could likely still be closed and we could still be doing online learning. So, or there might be another repeat of a different kind of pandemic. So right now, I think you might also want to consider looking at schools that are conducting their online learning well, so that, when emergency closure happens, you know that your child's education is still properly handled.
Now, again, I'm going to put my parent hat on because it's so easy. That might sound like a bit of a challenge, right? You can't go anywhere, you can't meet, interview the teachers. Would it be reasonable to say, I would like to have a Zoom call with the head teacher, the principal, or I'd like to have some type of viewing of how an online class is going, sit in on a Zoom call? Are those things realistic to ask for in searching for a new school?
Yeah, I think that kind of thing that we can do. Certainly at my school, we are planning to do some virtual Zoom parent meetings to encourage prospective parents to come and hear me talk about our particular school. I mean, this particular forum here is more general, right? We're talking about distance learning in general, not about my school. But in these particular Zoom calls for parents who are interested in my school, we will run those Zoom conference calls. They can ask questions of me. I can answer directly. I can show examples of what our students are doing. And so I think that's very doable. And certainly parents who are starting the school in July need to be aware of the possibility that schools will still be in distance learning. We don't know for sure. No one knows for sure how things will be in July. And so I think there'll be good questions to ask about how is your school handling distance learning? How are you adapting? How are you improving? Can you promise me good quality education for my children if we are doing distance learning for the next 6 months, say?
Right. Well, maybe not a bad time to plug. CIS group of schools are having individual open houses on May 8th and May 9th, and they'll be doing them through Zoom, I understand. So it will be very much alumni from overseas university that are popping in for a talk, head teachers and teachers, as well as maybe some students that will be discussing and answering questions in a similar forum to this, but for each individual CIS group school. So stay tuned for that if you're looking at schools, for sure. Let's go back to, we've got another question. Do you have virtual 3D tours? Well, we do. CIS does have virtual tours of Bona Vista, the campus in Jakarta, as well as the Kelapa Gading campus in Jakarta. And I understand that they're adding more virtual tours, but if you want to take a quick virtual tour, I'll put that in the link below, as well as in the recorded version. So if you're interested in taking a virtual tour around the CIS school, you're more than welcome to take a run. How can I find out more info about your school now that we cannot visit your school? I think we've addressed that. You could take a virtual tour, or of course you could reach out to the admissions teams of any school. Please check out the website. It's got a number of different avenues of approach, different ways to get in touch, brochures. Most schools have videos. And again, there's the virtual tour for BV and Kelapa Gading, which are fairly large schools, but I think they give you a very good taste of the atmosphere in any of the CIS group schools. It's a bright, happy place with nice big clean white walls and a lot of facilities, a lot more laboratory facilities than I had in my school, I'll say that. Yeah, so let me see if we have any more questions here. What's been your experience as educators so far at a personal level? I don't mind. I hope you don't mind if I asked, how are you dealing with this, Andrew, as an educator? Kavita, how are you dealing with this? Is is this a more opportunity than challenge, or challenge? You know, what is it for you personally so far along our independent journeys?
Well, I'm certainly seeing it. Oh, you go ahead, Kavita, first.
Go ahead, Andrew. No worries.
I'm certainly seeing it as an opportunity. Of course, it is somewhat stressful to operate in a crisis situation, but I kind of thrive on that a little bit anyway. And I want to make sure that we have the best possible outcome for the school after this crisis is over. And so I'm energized by that, about troubleshooting and trying to make things better. I like to do that. So I'm kind of energized by that. But at the same time, I know as a school leader, I'm juggling several different things. I'm juggling handling the actual medical crisis, the risk for students, the risk for teachers, the fact that we have expatriate teachers also who certainly will feel the pressure to go home to their home countries, being aware of our responsibility to our teachers and staff in the school. That's a very big part of what a school leader does. At the same time, we have to have the business savvy to make sure that the risks financially are also managed. Because there's all kinds of potential outcomes from this crisis as well. We want to make sure that our school has a good financial foundation to serve us many years into the future. So juggling all the issues there. And then, of course, you've got distance learning, a whole new way of learning, training of teachers, communication with parents, managing the admissions process in a different kind of way now. So there are many different areas to juggle at the moment. But me personally, I kind of thrive on that, but I'm working long hours, I must admit, and had a few late nights in the last few weeks, but hopefully the outcome is good for my school in the end.
Kavita?
All right. So I work, my job revolves around supporting schools and teachers in their academics and also in the area of curriculum. So what this has done is definitely an opportunity. We have this professional development program for teachers. We started phase 1, and what online learning did is that it accelerated it to phase 2. So, you know, I'm looking at how I could support those teachers. So we are looking at conducting webinars on the topics that teachers need help, and covering technical skills, maybe even mental health. What are the strategies and classroom tips that, you know, they can apply in their classes so that they could provide these students and also parents a better online learning experience.
I see. Well, it sounds like, you know, neither one of you are walking away from this challenge. Rather than you're diving into it. So that's great to see. As somebody who's worked from home office about 50% of the week for 6 years, it's nice to not be the only one doing Zoom calls. It's interesting. Everybody's catching up. So I know that my own personal productivity, after I acclimate, after I get used to working from home, which took a long time, I got to tell you, as a professional working in an office, and then in 2016 switching to 50% time in the home office, it took me almost a year to get comfortable with that. I found myself struggling with the transition, and I have a lot of empathy for parents and for students, and of course educators who are going through that process now. So good on you for having the right attitude. Kavita, what are academics around the world saying this will do, this effort to educate suddenly inside the classroom? How will this affect children globally? Is this going to be a lost year? Is there going to be an opportunity to fast track productivity up, productivity down? Where is this going to leave children globally around the world? Are we all in the same boat, or is this country by country specific?
That's a good question. Okay, one ponders, and I think as much as there are difficulties presented here to some teachers and some students, there are also a lot of opportunities. One of the opportunity I can think of would be, with students being engaged online, and now that they have a feel of doing this full time, the students might see, furthering their education online as a viable option. Okay, so that is one. And also, some might be completely put off and decide that I'm not even going to do this. But, there is definitely, a trend that we should be expecting, that students might see this as a viable option. So you might have students doing part-time studying, or taking a gap year, doing something else besides going to universities, yet studying, part-time as it goes. And that gives them opportunity to develop. One is through the academic, and also for them to get experience. They might be working part-time too, right? So those, might change their lifestyle a little bit, but I think it wouldn't change so much. But I definitely see online education to be, a choice of students in the future.
I see. So I think it probably speaks to some of the concerns parents have around that, that it's unique to Indonesia, or it's unique to Singapore. But I think it's fair to say that every single school system in every single country is grappling with these challenges. So that's something to keep in mind. Andrew, we've got a question for you here. In terms of how online learning and the new way of learning at SIS, as it were, in terms of how this looks at the school, on our last webinar, we had a question for you about, how you are gauging parent satisfaction, student engagement with surveys. Is there any update to that? Is there any, I understand you're staying engaged with parents. Is there any change in the feedback, or which way is the wind blowing?
Yeah, we've been trying to monitor feedback and improve week by week, because it is a very sudden change to the way our school operates. And there are big adjustments for parents to make, for students to make, and for the school to make as well. And so we're monitoring feedback very carefully, having many Zoom meetings like this with our teachers and leaders to work out how we need to tweak it one way or the other. So of course, a big concern, especially from parents of preschool and lower primary, is about the amount of work that parents have to do at their end in order to facilitate the learning taking place. So sometimes parents might be working themselves from home, or may not be able to be there all the time, when students have to log on for some reason. And so that challenge at the home level is very real for parents. And so we have to always think about the parent point of view and tweak our delivery to account for that.
Okay, and what does that look like? I think we had a discussion earlier where you were telling us that one of the first findings from these surveys was that the initial rollout of class work online was too much. It was too much for working parents to handle with kids running around. So there was some adjustment there.
Yeah, not necessarily too much, but maybe the mode didn't suit all parents. And so we've got some parents who would like to do, more synchronous face-to-face Zoom calls, and some who really can't cope with that because they haven't got the right number of devices or people who can help at home at that particular time. And so you've got these different groups of parents who have different concerns. So it's about trying to find the right balance for the whole community. And, as time has gone on, we've had some expatriate families leave and go home to their home countries. So maybe they're in different time zones now. So we have to also cater for them who can't always log in at the same time. And so it's those kinds of adjustments. So for example, a lot of parents are stressed about learning Chinese, learning Mandarin, because the parent themselves doesn't speak Mandarin. And so there's stress about helping their child do the Mandarin study at home. So we've adjusted our program a little bit, and we are focusing more on the oral now. So we're actually doing more Zoom calls for Chinese, and more focus on oral and less focus on writing. So this is relieving parents a little bit of that burden, and we'll just catch up on the writing side once we return to normal class.
So it sounds like a key component of successful online learning, no matter what kind of organization you are, is not just about broadcasting and pushing the message out, but also listening and adapting.
Yeah, it's very important because there are various stakeholders involved and people with different positions and different needs. And so you've got to find the right balance for everyone.
Right. Okay, Jen, we've got one for you here. You mentioned Goformative. You mentioned a few platforms, and just so everybody is aware, we've pasted the links to those platforms in the chat. So feel free to copy and paste and save those, explore those great platforms that Jen called out. Jen, I want to zero in on just one, and not to get too granular, but Goformative. That seems really interesting to me. Can you walk us through, a typical use case of Goformative?
What's really fantastic about Goformative is that it allows the teacher to interact with every student instantaneously. So Goformative creates this platform so the teacher sees the screens of every student. So the teacher can ask a question and every student can answer at exactly the same time. So there's no lag between the teacher asking a question and getting results from the student. Every student gets to respond from every teacher. And this is actually far more powerful than the traditional classroom because the teacher knows what every child is thinking at the same time. So they can address any misunderstandings, any child that's lagging behind. It's quite revolutionary in a way because every child is getting a personalized journey in their education.
So it sounds like, to a large extent, even after lockdowns are lifted, kids are back in school, some of these platforms, some of these learning platforms are getting their spotlight moment right now and may find their way into the regular, more traditional classroom. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to move forward by taking what's best in the traditional classroom and what's best in the virtual world. And in that, create a whole new blended way of teaching and learning that's actually going to be better than what it was before.
Okay. Well, that's the way I look at it. And some of my friends and family, and as a father, I also look at it like that. But I'm always curious about, at the senior academic level, and maybe Kavita, this to go back to that question about, what are academics saying about the impact of this globally? What about at a micro level? I mean, what have you been hearing from some of the same surveys that Andrew was talking about in terms of what value add are we going to get from distance learning right now? And I know there's concern about, is it going to hold up to traditional? And I think there's some debate there, but schools like CIS are really, really adapting aggressively. And I'm curious as to, is there more than one silver lining here?
Right. So I would say that one of the value add is definitely with all of us doing online learning now, teachers' technology skills has improved. So there is definitely adoption of technology. And you know how when it comes to introducing change in a work environment, you always have the early adopters and you also have those who just refuse to adopt. But now with a situation here and because this is so sudden, everybody's adopting technology. Of course, there are some levels of struggles coming here and there, but I could also see that from the last survey that I've just done with the teachers that teachers genuinely want to improve their technology skills. And it's not just on common platforms or platforms that are easy to use. They really want to do better. So, with this kind of drive, we know that teachers' technology adoption is definitely going to improve. And that would, as Jen said, make them open to having or conducting blended learning type of classroom when schools open 100%. Because now that they've experienced it, they have worked towards developing that skills. They might have even perfected doing it online. Why not bring it into the classroom? Because one of the, of course, the benefit of blended learning is, in some studies, they say that blended learning gives us better students engagement and also, a better personalization of students learning, and that's good for the kids, right? So I see that happening. And also, now that teachers have tried getting students' attention, especially in a synchronous classroom, and sometimes it's hard to keep them engaged when they are online, they would have tried new pedagogies, new learning techniques. And that would be also definitely a learning curve for them that they might bring into the classroom. So the silver lining is, I think the teachers' classroom practices will change for the better with the introduction of e-learning.
Okay, excellent. That's illustrative. I think, just to take that a step further in terms of digital disruption, we're living through it, I think, to a large extent, right? Educators, the education systems of the world were fairly quick to adopt computers, maybe even before they knew what to do with them. I know my grade 3 class didn't really know what to do with the computer. It was an Apple II, and it just sat at the back of the room. And if you were good, you got to go play word games on it. But it was, I think, the entire education system around the world maybe needed a little knock to jump in the pool rather than keep dipping their toe in terms of disruption. So,
yeah.
As a parent myself, I find that I'm more concerned most of the time about how this is affecting my child, but I'm also cognizant. I'm also very aware that it was probably overdue, this nudge into disruption. And disruption's always a transition, change is always a little bit uncomfortable. But it's nice to be working alongside people that obviously know how to use Zoom. We're obviously that technical savvy. I think everybody's becoming a professional. So last question for Andrew. How do you see this, given the nature of the surveys and you've got your finger on the pulse of what parents are saying? Where do you see this going? I mean, in terms of digital learning, not necessarily what governments are going to do with lockdowns and what have you, but let's assume that we're still in a distance learning scenario in September. Do you see vast amounts of change across all school systems, or do you believe that it's going to be iterative steps adding on to what we've learned so far?
I think we'll continue to get better and better as time goes on. Just like any kind of learning, we are learning from our experience and adapting as we go. So the current way of learning in a school environment has existed for over 100 years. And so there's been many adaptations along the way. So right now, I've been saying to my parents here at my current school that teachers have a finely tuned sense of managing a classroom full of students. They can hear students out of the corner of their eye. They can see students over here. They can face the whiteboard and know what's going on behind them. They can kind of pick up the tone of a classroom. That's a skill that developed over many years. We'll continue to develop those same kinds of skills for distance learning as well. So we'll continue to adapt and improve. And I think that parents who are struggling right now, we will find that things will get easier for them if we continue doing this for longer.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. And Kavita and Jen, thanks again for your time. And for everybody that joined us today, we really appreciate the questions. And we hope that we're taking learning so far into consideration. We won't make this webinar too long. So we're gonna conclude now. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Saturday.